Hello, Mrs. Bennett. I hope you're having a wonderful morning or afternoon, depending on when you're watching this. This is our lecture over books 21 and 22. Hi, I'm your team captain, Peyton Dersh, and these lectures are by Emily Alt, myself, Daniel Landrum, Peyton, Jack Payton, and Olivia Stashevsky. Thank you. I hope you enjoy these lectures.
Of the lecture will be over book 21, lines 247 through 484. Some passages to reread closely are lines 247 through 252, lines 451 through 455, and lines 480 through 484. Our first key question for this discussion is what was the servants' reaction to Odysseus being revealed, and why do they react this way? In the beginning of this half of the book, Odysseus reveals to his servants that he is actually King Odysseus. When they see this, they immediately start crying and are so overjoyed to see that their master has returned. They react this way because back in these times, it wasn't as horrible and gruesome as it's often made out to be a servant. They're so grateful that their master has returned that they're just so overjoyed with this happiness. Question is, what imagery is shown in lines 451 through 455, and how does it relate to Homer? Lines 451 through 455 says, "So they mocked, but Odysseus, mastermind in action, once he'd handled the great bow and scanned every inch, then, like an expert singer skilled at lyre and song, who strains a string to a new peg with ease, making the pilot sheep gut fast at either end, so with his virtuoso ease, Odysseus strung his mighty bow." So this shows this great imagery of Odysseus stringing his great bow, and it relates to Homer around line 453, when he says, "Like an expert singer skilled at lyre and song, who strains a string to a new peg at ease." It relates to Homer because this is giving the imagery of a storyteller like Homer. Question is, what imagery is shown in lines 451 through 455, and how does it relate to Homer? Lines 451 through 455 says, "So they mocked, but Odysseus, mastermind in action, once he'd handled the great bow and scanned every inch, then, like an expert singer skilled at lyre and song, who strains a string to a new peg with ease, making the pilot sheep gut fast at either end, so with his virtuoso ease, Odysseus strung his mighty bow." So this shows this great imagery of Odysseus stringing his great bow, and it relates to Homer around line 453, when he says, "Like an expert singer skilled at lyre and song, who strains a string to a new peg at ease." It relates to Homer because this is giving the imagery of a storyteller like Homer.
Hello, Mrs. Bennett. This is Peyton Dersh. I hope you're having a wonderful day, and in my portion of the lecture, we will cover book 22, lines 1 through 177. The first passage to reread are lines 32 through 43. The question we will be discussing over this passage will be, what do the suitors do in reaction to Antinous' death, and how does this contrast them to Odysseus? So if you read, Odysseus has just now shot the leader of the suitors, Antinous, through the throat, and the suitors they're quite shaken. They're over here, you see, they had not realized Odysseus has not quite yet revealed himself as the real king of Ithaca. And so as you hear, groping frantic, each one persuading himself the guest had killed the man by chance. Poor fools, blind to the fact that all their necks were in the noose, their doom sealed. So what you're seeing here is really the suitors, just really ignorance, and they're not taking action. They're just sitting there freaking out. They have nothing planned out. They don't understand. They haven't come to realization with what's really going on. They still don't see their wrongs. And this lack of repentance and lack of planning and just overall lack of bravery and strength here is something that we never see in Odysseus, really. And as we've seen throughout the whole entire Odyssey, Odysseus has been portrayed as a very strong, brave character, and he's the tactician. He's very smart. He thinks of everything ahead of time. Nothing could really catch him off guard. But the suitors, on the other hand, are not like that. And as Homer has told us the story of Odysseus's long journey, everything that Odysseus does, there's an element of comedy. I mean, and so you start to think, to have a really this happy ending here, you have to have the qualities of somebody like Odysseus, whereas the suitors have nothing, none of Odysseus's fine comic qualities, therefore ensuing a tragic ending. So as this contrast, and we've seen this in previous books as well, so as we see this contrast between them, you can see if Odysseus's ending is going to be comic, as we know it is, because Homer, I mean, he's practically put it in neon lights, that comedy, and the suitors are definitely going to meet a tragic demise. Next lines we will be rereading are 64 through 71, and the key question for these lines is, what elements does Homer include or not include in this passage, and how does this convey a tragic tone? So as we've seen, clearly, I mean, the title Slaughter in the Hall, this is not going to end up well for the suitors, or maybe Odysseus, we don't know, but from these lines anyway. And we will see, reading these lines. So, as we read this, Odysseus he's now confronting Eurymachus and telling him for all the wrongs he's done, after Eurymachus really is like, no, it was all Antinous' fault. He's gone now. We're innocent. And that's really not true at all. But as we're talking about the elements in this text, and it's not just in this passage, really, it's just in this chapter as a whole, quite frankly, there's no comic language. I mean, there's yet in this passage saying that it would end up well for anybody in this chapter, and at this point, we've seen a real lack of feminine that we've been receiving in the past couple of chapters. There's been a lot of feminine, and we know that feminine creates a balance throughout the polis and will lead to the happy ending that we're looking for. And this lack of feminine kind of reminds me of in the Iliad. This chapter, it is all about the battle, all about the blood and the gore. And we see here that these suitors are not going to end well, and this is just another little thing that's included that can contribute to the tone of this chapter. Next lines to reread are 162 through 167. The question for this passage will be, how does Telemachus react to his father's allegations against the goatherd, and what does this say about his character? So some context before we get into the lecture is there's a little passageway that is left ajar that the suitors could use to escape, and Odysseus's first thought is that one of his servants that he had informed, the goatherd, had conspired against him with the suitors and left this door open and had warned the suitors. And he's saying, what, and it would be so now to Telemachus, is he immediately confesses and says, "It was me, I wasn't thinking." And that's really a hard thing to do, especially, I mean, in the midst of this battle. It would be a lot easier for him to just say, "Yeah, it probably was the goat herd." But him confessing to this mistake, this really shows a quality a lot like Odysseus, is this honesty. And honesty is kind of related to comedy in a way. And so this passage just really describes Telemachus as a moral and honest person, somebody a lot like, as has many of the same qualities that we've seen Odysseus to have. And these are also very distinct qualities. And Homer sort of elevating these certain qualities through Telemachus and Odysseus, who are the heroes, show us a lot about the values of the Greek culture and what they valued here, and they're quite similar to what we value today. But that's sort of off topic here. But I just believe that this really shows Telemachus as a strong character, as he's been built up to be through the years.
All right, book 22. Woohoo. Lines 178 to 345. Passage number 1 will be 178 to 208, in which Melanthius is hanged, but not really hanged, alright? He's like kind of hanged, but not like the neck hanging. I think, yeah, I don't think you hang people by their neck, like by tying them to a plank. I don't really know what they did, but whatever. What are Eumaeus and Philotius? Would that be like floaties? Like the little things you put on your arms? Little arm floaties? That's weird. Told to do to Melanthius. Alright, let's look at that. Well, here we go. This is a thing that Odysseus said. He said, "You two wrench Melanthius's arms and legs behind him, fling him down in the storeroom, lash his back to a plank, and strap a twisted cable fast to the scoundrel's body. Hoist him up a column until he hits the rafters. Let him dangle in agony, still alive, for a good long time." So, like, they're gonna hang him from a column on a plank, and they're gonna like tie him to the thing. I would say they were gonna tie him to barbed wire, but I know that was invented like much later. I think it would be better if they tied him to barbed wire, but whatever. They're tying him to a plank and putting him on a column in the storeroom. And like Odysseus is so cruel here, right? He's like the hero, but he's so cruel. What did he do? What did Melanthius do for Odysseus to be so cruel? Well, he got the suitors' armor. He was going and getting the suitors' armor and weapons and stuff so that they could fight back. And Odysseus doesn't want them to fight back. Odysseus wants to kill them easily. Sorry, that's in the way. Odysseus wants them to be dead easily, And it was easy because they didn't have armor and weapons. Well, some of them have weapons, but that's because they live in Greece. All right, that was a little bit of a rant. All right, next passage, 234 to 252. I don't want to do this. All right, in which Athena calls out Odysseus. Like, read that. Okay, now, what is Athena accusing Odysseus of, right? Well, Athena is accusing Odysseus of being a wimp and sucking, because she lashed out at Odysseus now with blazing accusations. "Where's it gone, Odysseus? Your power, your fighting heart, the great soldier who fought for famous white-armed Helen." I don't get that. Like, doesn't everyone have white arms? Okay. "Battling Trojans 9 long years, non-stop, no mercy, mowing their armies down in grueling battle. You who seized the broad streets of Troy with your fine strategic stroke. How can you, now you've returned to your own house, your own wealth, bewail the loss of your combat strength in a war with suitors? And it's like italicized, so she put emphasis on that, like suitors, man. Come on, these guys are wimps trying to marry your wife because they can't find one of their own because they suck. Nobody wants them. All right, so you know, what is her purpose for doing so? Her purpose is like get it, you know, get him, yeah, you know, that kind of thing. She's trying to inspire him and such. Oh man, this is weird and awkward, and this is probably gonna run longer than usual. And by usual, I mean usually it's like 7 minutes. I feel like that's too long, anyways. All right, lines 285 to 305. Woo. The suitors keep missing their shots. Not like drinking, right? They don't drink in battle, I think. Maybe that's a good idea? I don't know. Why is Athena causing the javelins to miss? It's a good question. Well, that's actually a good, easy question to answer. She's causing the javelins to miss so that Odysseus doesn't get hit and his people, so that they can win. You know, she's also making their javelins actually hit, but we don't want to do that because like I don't want to deal with that because there's a lot of it. There's just so much javelin throwing, and I only want to deal with the missing part. All right. But why does one still graze Telemachus? And as I just saw that there was also one that kind of like grazed Eumaeus, right? You might, I don't know. And but I didn't see that. Okay, I'm sorry. What do you want from me? Okay, so why does one still graze him? Well, that's so that it's not so obviously that they're getting the support of a god, maybe. Also, maybe just chance. Maybe the gods aren't so powerful. Maybe I shouldn't say that. I don't know. In, what was it called? That last one we read that I forgot what its name was. Yeah, I don't know. Completely lost it. Um, you know what I'm talking about. I keep trying to say the Italy, but I know that's not right. Pretty sure it starts with I. Um, yeah, I have no idea. So, because remember, like Athena was gonna make it miss, but she kind of messed up, you know, because the gods aren't perfect. That's like a recurring theme, right? She kind of messed up, and so that one arrow still hit Menelaus right in the loins. Loins, that's a nice word, you know. And just so that you know they got where they got hit. True amphibian nicked Telemachus on the wrist. Telemachus, it's Telemachus on the wrist. The glancing blade just barely broke his skin. Like, yeah, I probably said that with the wrong kind of tone. Ctesippus sent a long spear sailing over Eumaeus's buckler, grazing his shoulder blade, but the weapon skittered off and hit the ground. So like they got hit, but it didn't do anything because Athena just couldn't get them all. It's like there was like a film theory video about that with like Magneto, but that doesn't matter. I'm sorry. Um, I keep getting off topic and distracted. All right, that's really it. Sorry, this one is so bad. I guess.
Hello, Mrs. Bennett. I'm Jack Payton, and I'll be presenting Book 22, lines 345 through 529. Let's look at the first passage to reread and question. So it's going to be over lines 423 through 430, and it's over a Homeric simile. The corresponding key question asks, what literary device is put in place by Homer, and how does this how does this feature set the theme of this extravagant event? So first, let's jump right in by distinguishing just a regular simile from a Homeric simile. And as I discussed with you earlier, a Homeric simile is characterized by its length, typically, and how he uses it, Homer, to signify, to mark a extravagant, a poignant event or a turning point in this story or passage. So in this particular instance, the Homeric simile is comparing Odysseus as a lion, and it helps mark the turning point in the story as he's getting back his home, he's cleansing his palace, and he's getting it back under control from those suitors who've had it for years on end and have been very disrespectful to his serving people, his own son. And I think it just helps distinguish this as a big event, as something very important, and as something that definitely needs to be taken note of. So I think that's what Homer is trying to do by using this extravagant simile in this book.
Now let's move on to the second key question. It's going to be over lines 430 through 444, and it's about the traditions of battle. The corresponding key question asks, what traditional aspect of battle is represented in these lines, and how does it express the persona of the main character, Odysseus? So, a while back, when we actually first started with the Iliad, we talked about the respect in battle, and the how almost not led as if it was a crime, but it was definitely taboo that you could never shame your leader or shame your side, and not glorifying, the victory over the bodies of the dead, the burning and the appropriate disposal of the bodies. This is all something that we talked about earlier, typically with the Iliad, but you can see it here in the Odyssey, and it helps drive the story forward, as it's a quality that doesn't, it's a quality that, typical battles are carried out in an area called the No Man's Land, but for this to be repeated here in Odysseus with his own home, over these bodies of the women, of the quote-unquote whores, of the suitors, of these people who have taken over his palace and kept all his other serving people captive for years on end before he could come and reclaim his possession. It really shows his true persona, and what a great tactician, and how respectful and how patient he really is as a leader. And I think that's what I'm trying to get at this key question.
So now we'll move on to our third and final key question. This is going to be the simplest, and it's over lines 471 through 512. It's about comedic evidence. And the question asks, what action is carried out by Odysseus in these lines, and how might this drive the story to a comedic end? Basically, all he's doing is he brought out, once again, the shamed women who are now in the courtyard, out of the palace, and they're there to be slaughtered, which I know sounds gruesome, but basically it's just the cleansing of his palace, the burning of the bodies. Respectfully, everything is done as it should be, and the rejoice of Odysseus by his loyal serving women, once the quote-unquote suitors' whores are out. Same with not just, of course, the women, but the suitors themselves. So it's basically just getting the palace back where it needs to be in a good state. I wouldn't say mint, but under the leadership of Odysseus. So now we'll move on to our third and final key question. This is going to be the simplest, and it's over lines 471 through 512. It's about comedic evidence. And the question asks, What action is carried out by Odysseus in these lines, and how might this drive the story to a comedic end? Basically, all he's doing is he brought out once again the shamed women who are now in the courtyard, out of the palace, and they're there to be slaughtered. Which I know sounds gruesome, but basically it's just the cleansing of his palace, the burning of the bodies. Respectfully, everything is done as it should be, and the rejoice of Odysseus by his loyal serving women, once the quote-unquote suitors' whores are out. Same with not just, of course, the women, but the suitors themselves. So it's basically just getting the palace back where it needs to be in a good state. I wouldn't say mint, but under the leadership of Odysseus.